Welcome back. Today we get the transition pan out of the Mustang and do some more discovery. Let's get at it. Okay, so last time we were looking at this transition pan and some of the damages that had been done in the past. There's still a question of whether or not the inner structure where the shocks mount, and I'll show you on the new panel, if that's intact or not. So what I plan to do is start cutting away the parts I know I'm going to replace. If it is isolated to really just up here, I might do something just from here to the front. If there's other issues, you know, I might go all the way back and do the entire panel. So we'll see about that. But let me show you the new piece and kind of how it's put together. Okay, here's the new transition pan, upside down, obviously. That's towards the front of the car. So you can see the way that this is put together. It is welded as one assembly. Your shocks, rear shocks mount here in these holes, and your frame rails go in between here underneath this tab on either side. What that means is installed, you can't just drop this in. Because your frame rails are sandwiched in between here and here, unless you were starting from absolute scratch and putting the new frame rails in, you need to remove this piece from the upper. So that's what I'm going to do. Once I have everything supported and start cutting away, no matter how, if I'm doing the entire thing or just the upper and sectioning parts in, I need to remove this piece. So I'll go ahead and drill out the spot welds from above, just so I have the holes on top, and separate the lower where the shock mount is from the transition pan. So before I get started on anything, we've mentioned in previous videos, I've mentioned in previous videos, how I have everything supported up front. Because this is fairly structural, it's got that cross member, the shock mount panel, and just kind of removing back. What I'm going to do first, I've got a few random things in the trunk. I'm going to empty out the trunk, get the gas tank out of there, get the rear window glass out of there, just so I have, first off, as few obstacles as possible, but also as little weight as possible. I also have some pipe stands actually that are very adjustable, but they go up pretty high. So what I'm going to do is probably put them, once everything's out of the way, right about here, maybe. We'll see. We'll play it by ear and I'll show you, just to support the rear of the car. The frame rails look like they're in good shape and the roof's good. So I'm not that concerned, but just to minimize sag and make sure everything's supported. Okay, I've shown this a little bit in the past, but this is the underside where the shocks mount. You know, every time I look at this, that's a scratch in the undercoating. I'm not seeing the same damage that I see up above. You would think if they had air shocks or whatever would cause that damage, you would notice it here, but I don't see any deformation of the panel, etc. So interesting. So what I'm going to do when I start cutting things out of here, I'm going to separate and start by leaving this in place. It might be that they just did a good job at hiding it, but once I separate this upper panel from the shock mount panel, then I'll get a good view inside and see if there's any internal damage to the structure. But as it sits right now, it doesn't make sense to remove all of this. We will see. Okay, scratch what I said about these pipe stands. With how I have everything supported right now and the height it is, yeah, there's no way that is fitting underneath that frame rail. So I don't think it's a huge concern if I'm only removing the upper bit. If I actually have to dig in and cut out that cross member where the shocks mount, then we'll figure something else out. But for right now, we're just going to leave it as is. Okay, I've been spending some time just sitting in here looking at the extent of things and the new panel and kind of plotting out my next move here. So obviously we've seen the damage, we've seen the cracking here, but recall underneath, things actually look pretty good. So we'll see if that's deception or if really the interior's fine. I think the first option is if everything looks good, then I can overlap with this frame rail and replace everything up to here, and then just create a seam either on this rear support or beyond this rear support, and just patch in everything from here forward. If we go a little further around, this is where the gas tank goes and the trunk. I had looked at this, obviously years ago, but sorry, you got a shadow. Let me fix it. Okay, so this is pitted and obviously has some corrosion, but still solid. I wasn't going to mess with that at all. I was going to rest encapsulate or treat however I wind up doing and leave it alone. But obviously, while we're at it, if I'm already looking at this, we'll see. If I dig in and everything's fine and I deem it not worth going all the way, then I won't. So I guess options 2 and 3 are take this pan all the way back and go all the way to the edge and reattach to the wheelhouse there. So I could do, at a minimum, I'm going to replace this front part here. I might also do this kind of on both sides all the way to the wheel wells and or all the way back to the trunk. That's all going to just depends on how things look when I start digging in. All right, I used a 5/16 spot weld cutter to separate the top panel from the shock cross member. I think that's what we're calling it now. I was kind of surprised. There were only, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. If I did my counting right, there were only 12 spot welds connecting the upper and lower portions here, which doesn't look like that doesn't exactly align with what I'm seeing on the other side. We'll see when I start digging in. But here we've got a really good look at the inner structure. So once I remove the panel or start cutting away the upper panel, we'll look inside and see how the one on the car looks. I mean, if everything looks beautiful, it doesn't make sense to go through all the effort to replace this. If things are looking questionable or if there's damage on this inside structure, you can see it's actually two pieces together. If there's any damage, then we can brace it up and swap it out with this new one. Coming over here to the upper panel, it's actually kind of interesting. The EDP coating, you can see where it some spots where the two panels were touching didn't get coated. So it looks like, I don't know if it's something that they spray on after the fact. You'd think there'd be more gaps if that were the case, or maybe it rubbed off there, who knows. But anyway, yeah, pretty happy with how this came apart. Okay, now that we have this lower panel completely exposed, you can see where I scratched away a little bit. There's a little bit of surface rust on here, but I am finding no reason to replace this. The damage that we saw on the top, I'm guessing, and folks have conjectured that it was from either air shocks or something that went through. I'm guessing that this was replaced because I am seeing no indications of damage whatsoever in here. There's minor surface rust. It is solid. So even looking all the way back into the corners, again, we've got surface rust, but I don't see any actual issues in there. So I'm guessing that what happened was this was replaced after they did whatever damage they did. They replaced this cross member, but then just patched up poorly the transition pan there. So I don't see a reason to remove it. However, let me show you. This is not very well connected to the floor. So I'm not sure if when they put it back to, there we go. When they put it back together, if they just used panel adhesive or just kind of hope, maybe it thought hope would hold it together. But thinking about all of the damage along here, the issues going on, I think I'm going to, at a minimum, go all the way back to here, and probably, just because we've talked earlier about the pitting along here, probably do the entire transition pan. That way I won't have a non-original seam going on there. The only thing that's going to really be interesting is this pan goes underneath the side pan, side trunk pan. So I'll just need to be careful, cut up whatever welds are there. If it's even held together, it might just slide right out. We'll see. So yeah, I'll section things out. Before I cut things apart, I'll take measurements of where these brackets are, because we'll have to move those over to the new transition pan. Additionally, we're going to need to add, the transition pan comes with the seat belt mounts in the middle, but not the ones on the edge. So we'll need to add the seat belt mounting points on both sides as well. So I'm going to continue on, continue cutting away, sectioning out the sides of the transition pan, and then clean everything up. So as I'm using the spot weld cutter, I'm gently prying up and trying to get only as deep as I need to remove the top panel from what's underneath. It is possible to go back and clean up if you cut too deep, which I've done plenty of in other places, but it's really a lot nicer if you don't have to, and it saves a ton of time. So one of the things that I found inside of this shock mount is this little emblem, Ford Mustang. So I don't know if this is well, I don't know what this is from. It looks like it might be center of a steering wheel. Yeah, if you know anything about this, let me know. This is kind of fun. Okay. There's a lot of scrap metal going on here. Yeah, you can see all the pieces that I've been sectioning out. One thing I did notice, and it does make me think that my guess is right about the underside being replaced. The replacement part only had 12 spot welds for the top going down to the lower shock plate cross member. You can see just kind of going along how many, I mean, we're talking about one every inch and a half, all the way around, and then all on this side. I didn't count them, but a couple more than the 12 total. So that is all out now. I still have to clean up the other side and get the trim pieces. Yeah, let me show you inside what I've got going on. Okay, on the inside, we've got all the way up here, and then probably the hardest part was getting all underneath. This piece is sandwiched in between, so I got to clean up a little bit under here. I'll probably peel back this upper piece before I put the new one in. And then obviously I'm going to treat all of this inside. Like I said, it's all really solid metal. There's no need to replace it unless I find something really crazy under there, but I don't think I will. Yeah, and then looking up inside the frame rails, everything looks really good. I'll clean, and then since I have the access, I'll just spray something up in there. We'll see what I've got handy. Anyway, tons of work. It is almost all the way out. just that little sliver left to go, and then we will clean and prep and get that new transition pan in. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully, moving forward soon, we're going to have that new transition pan in.